Finally got Ahab buried last week, and today we're going to start studying about Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. Now, we already had him a little bit earlier, but as I mentioned previously, not everything is in exact order. And this is beginning to talk about the beginning of his reign, and we will study about the rest of it. Hopefully, this won't take too awful long, not as long as Ahab. I don't know why there was so much written on Ahab. Maybe because he was such an evil person that he was an example of what not to be. But anyway, turn to 1 Kings chapter 22, and we're going to start with verse 41. And Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. And I want you to notice again, I've mentioned this multiple times, usually when it talks about a new king in Israel, it compares it to which year of the reign of the king of Judah, and vice versa. You know, if you have a new king in Judah, it compares it to the year of the reign of the king of Israel. So Judah began to reign, Jehoshaphat began to reign in Judah in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. Now, as I mentioned before, we've already seen Jehoshaphat as king. He had made a pact with Ahab, and they fought a battle, and Ahab was killed. But now we get to find out about Jehoshaphat. I'm getting mixed up this morning for some reason. I had too good a time last night, I guess, at fellowship meeting. Okay, he began to reign in the 4th year of Ahab, king of Israel. In verse 42, Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilhi. And he walked in all the ways of Asa his father. He turned not aside from it, doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. And I want to stop right there. Jehoshaphat is a good king. He does as the Lord would have him to do. He followed in the footsteps of his father. And we're about to see mostly this come to an end for a good while. The time of the good kings is practically over, at least for what we're going to see as far as in Israel, practically all of them, you know, and in Judah, not so much. You know, remember, in Judah, most of the Levites left Israel and went to Judah. So there were no religious leaders, or hardly any religious leaders in Israel. Anyway, so he walked in the ways of Asa his father, and he turned not aside from it. Now, when you're king, you can have pretty much anything you want, or anything like that, but he didn't turn aside. He didn't let the riches and the fame and the power, he didn't let it turn aside like many people do today. They get a little bit of power, and what do they want? More of it. Or they want to be able to do things that will feather their nest, so to speak. And he was doing that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. Now that's the most important thing. Now you can do something to please your neighbor, you can do something to please your friends or brothers and sisters or whatever, but our main thing should be to please the Lord. We need to please the Lord in whatever we do. We need to study the scriptures to find out what His will is for our life, and this is where we're going to find it. Anyway, goes on, nevertheless, the high places were not taken away, for the people offered and burnt incense yet in the high places. Now, Brother Gill seems to think that that is talking about the high places where they used to offer sacrifices to the Lord. Well, I don't think so. First of all, it says that he had done things that was pleasing to the Lord, that did that which was right in the eyes of the Lord. Nevertheless, in other words, something's not right. Nevertheless, the high places were not taken away. Now, this is not necessarily where the prophets of the groves. I believe this is somewhat different. Anyway, they people offered burnt incense and offerings in the high places. Now, the offerings were to be made at the temple. The temple was there. The Lord had a place for them to offer up to Him. And people were not doing as they were instructed to do here. So even if it was, the high places where they used to offer sacrifices to the Lord, they were still wrong in what they were doing. Anyway, verse 44, and Jehoshaphat made peace with the king of Israel. Now this goes back to the first part of this chapter where he made peace with Ahab, and they fought a battle together. They had peace for 3 years, I believe it was. I'm not going to turn back to it. We finally got Ahab buried. We're going to keep him there. Anyway, he made peace with the king of Israel. Now it goes on to say here, the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and his might that he showed and how he warred, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And he goes on to say some more of the things that he did. In verse 46, and the remnant of the Sodomites which remained in the days of his father Asa, he took out of the land. In other words, Asa didn't make all of them leave. Didn't throw them out. But Jehoshaphat did. He got rid of the remnant. Those that were left. Also, it says, then there was then no king in Edom, a deputy was king. Okay, now, you remember, probably not, because it's been a good while ago. David put a deputy or a viceroy, whatever you want to call him, over Edom, because they were causing trouble. And he had places built there where soldiers were at to keep them in line. So Edom and the Edomites are going to come back. They're going to cause trouble later on, but not in Jehoshaphat's time. But he has a deputy over them rather than a king. And verse 48, Jehoshaphat made ships of Tarshish to go to Ophir for gold. Now remember, Solomon sent ships to Ophir for gold. That's where part of his great wealth came from. But they were not, for the ships were broken at Ezion-Geber. So he wasn't a very good boat builder, or he was going against what the Lord wanted him to do, one or the other. Now we know that Jehoshaphat was a good king. He did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. But I think maybe in this he was doing things that he shouldn't. He was trying to maybe lay up wealth on earth rather than wealth in heaven. I don't know. It doesn't say the particular reason. Anyway, then said Ahaziah. Now that's the son of Ahab. Okay, well I should have just read the rest of the verse here. Then said Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, unto Jehoshaphat, let my servants go with thy servants in the ship. But Jehoshaphat would not. Now, I don't know why you would, again, I think this verse is out of order too, because why would you want to go in broken ships? And I think this was before the ships left. He wanted to go with him. Now, again, Jehoshaphat has made peace with Ahaziah, Ahab's son, and he shouldn't have. And Jehoshaphat slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. His father and Jehoram, his son, reigned in his stead. Now, we're going to turn to 2 Chronicles. Chapter 17 first. Now, we're not going to do all of this. We're going to do just a little bit of it. Again, this is the start of Jehoshaphat's reign. 2 Chronicles chapter 17 and verse 1. And Jehoshaphat his son reigned in his stead, that's Asa's stead, and strengthened himself against Israel. So, for 4 years at least, well, maybe not 4 years, but because they had peace for 3 years. Okay, so he strengthened himself against Israel. So he recognized Israel as a possible enemy, at least possible enemy, maybe not totally. But anyway, he strengthened himself against Israel, and he placed forces in all the fenced cities of Judah, and set garrisons in the land of Judah, and in the cities of Ephraim, which Asa his father had taken. And the Lord was with Jehoshaphat, because he walked in the ways and in the first ways of his father David, and sought not unto Baalim, but sought the Lord God of his father, and walked in his commandments, and not after the doings of Israel. Now, here being compared to the whole nation of Israel, not, no, kingdom. The nation of Israel, I believe still in the Lord's eyes was both Judah and the nation of Israel, the kingdom of Israel, sorry. Anyway, he was not going after the doings of Israel. Therefore the Lord established the kingdom in his hands, and all Judah brought to Jehoshaphat presents, and he had riches and honor and abundance, and his heart was lifted up in the ways of the Lord. Now, that's great. You know, if somebody says that, I'm doing a good job at Sunday school, first of all, I think they need their head examined. But second of all, it makes me feel good, because I do a lot of studying in this. And it's an effort, but it's an effort with benefits. I mean, you learn a little bit, maybe. I learn a lot. Because there's a lot of things I have to study that never gets brought out here. And his heart was lifted up in the ways of the Lord. Moreover, he took away the high places and groves out of Judah. Okay, now this says, part of it, it's like two different things. The high places and the groves, okay? Now, you remember, what's her name, Jezebel? She had a bunch of priests or prophets of the groves that ate at her table. Now that's not here. That's in Israel, but it's an evil place apparently, because they were evil prophets. Anyway, verse 7. Also, in the 3rd year of his reign, he sent to his princes, and that's the people over the various sundry towns and communities, even to Benhiel, and to Obadiah, and to Zechariah, and to Nathaniel, and to Micaiah, to teach in the cities of Judah. In other words, he was going to have everywhere, it was going to be taught throughout the land what the people should be doing, how they are to serve the Lord. And even on beyond that, at verse 8, and with them he sent Levites, even Shemaiah and Nathaniel, Nathaniah, sorry about that, and Zebediah and Asahel and Shemiramoth and Jehonathan. That's one I had never heard before, but anyway. And Adonijah, Tobijah, and Tob Adonijah, and Levites, and with them Elishama and Jehoram priest. So he wanted the people to be instructed in the Lord's work. Now, we're going to stop there in that particular part, and he had also men of war, strengthened not just spiritually, but militarily, and starting with verse 12 through verse 19. We're not going to read all of that, I don't think, anyway. And Jehoshaphat waxed great exceedingly, and he built in Judah castles and cities of store, in other words, storehouses where things were kept, probably food or maybe weapons, whatever it was they might need to go to battle. And he had much business in the cities of Judah. And the men of war, mighty men of valor, were in Jerusalem. So he kept them close by. That way he could be with them. He could lead them into battle. And those are the number of them according to the house of their fathers of Judah, the captain of thousands, Adnah the chief, and with him mighty men of valor, 300,000. Okay, and we're not going to read the rest. I read one. And you can read the rest of this chapter down through verse 19. This is all these men of valor. He had a strong army. It should be a lesson to us. We need to have a strong army. But not leave the other undone. We need to look after the spiritual needs of the people first. You notice that was mentioned first in the Bible. Okay? And then the military things. Okay, chapter 18, we're not going to read much in this at all, because this is pretty much the way chapter 22 of 1 Kings starts. And Jehoshaphat had riches and honor and abundance, and joined affinity with Ahab. This is where they got together, and they made a pact, and they were going to go fight at Ramoth Gilead, and they went, even though the Lord told them not to. And anyway, I don't think it necessarily was a defeat. It was more like a draw, because they all went to their own homes after the battle. Now, Ahab was killed. And anyway, after the battle's over, okay, hold on a minute here. Okay. We're going to read at about the end of the battle, starting with verse 33 of chapter 18. And a certain man drew a bow at a venture and smote the king of Israel, that's Ahab, between the joints of the harness. Now, all the rest of this chapter is pretty much like the first part of chapter 22 of 1 Kings. Almost word for word in some places. Anyway, a certain man, nobody in particular, nobody special, certain man drew a bow at a venture. He just pointed in the general direction and smote the king of Israel between the joints of the harness. In other words, where the joint is in the armor. And he hit him there. Therefore he said to his chariot men, turn thine hand that thou mayest carry me out of the host, for I am wounded. He said, get me out of here, basically. And the battle, verse 34, and the battle increased that day, howbeit the king of Israel stayed himself up in his chariots against the Syrians until the evening, and about the time of the sun going down, he died. So that was Ahab's death. We had already read about that. But then everybody went home. Everybody went to their own home. And, of course, Jehoshaphat, he went too. So this is the reason I think it was pretty much of a draw. Yeah, Ahab was killed. That was already foretold. Anyway, chapter 19 of 2 Chronicles, verse 1, and Jehoshaphat the king of Judah returned to his house in peace to Jerusalem. Okay, we have peace again. The battle's over. Everybody went home. Again, that's why I think it was pretty much a draw. Now, you remember, Jehoshaphat was a good king. Did things that pleased the Lord. Verse 2 here, and Jehu, the son of Hanani, the seer. Now you remember Hanani? He was the one that rebuked Asa. Asa was a good king. Asa was so mad he threw him in prison. Anyway, Jehu, the son of Hanani, the seer, went out to meet him and said to King Jehoshaphat, well, it's good to see you. I'm glad you made it through the battle. No, that's not what he told him. He said, shouldst thou help the ungodly and love them that hate the Lord? Therefore is wrath upon thee from before the Lord. You did something wrong. And it was so obvious that it was wrong. You know, shouldst thou help the ungodly? No, we're not to help the ungodly. And love them that hate the Lord. Now there was an affection between Jehoshaphat and Ahab because they were both Israelites of the nation of Israel, not the kingdom of Israel, the nation of Israel, which is Judah and Israel combined. But there's going to be a price to pay. Therefore is wrath upon thee from before the Lord. Now this is not going to be in his time. It doesn't say so here, but it comes later on during his son and his grandson's reign. There's going to be a judgment, and I think some for this and some for their own actions. But, verse 3, nevertheless, there are good things found in thee, in that thou hast taken away the groves out of the land, and hast prepared thine heart to seek God. Now, we know that God is sovereign. God is in control. God is in charge. We are his elect. Those of us that are saved are his elect. All of that is in his hand. But it says right here, and hast prepared thine heart to seek God. Now, how many of us before service this morning prayed that the Lord would bless us, that we would have a good song service, a good Sunday school lesson, a good preaching service? We need to prepare our hearts to seek God. And not just when we're coming to church. We need to seek the Lord when we're in our homes. We need to seek the Lord when we're driving down the road in our car. We need to seek the Lord all the time, what his will is in our life. Anyway, verse 4, and Jehoshaphat dwelt at Jerusalem. In other words, he stayed there. He didn't go out anymore for a good while. And he went out again through the people from Beersheba to Mount Ephraim, and brought them back unto the Lord God of their fathers. Now, he went out personally. Now we have nowadays mostly they send out I don't know, probably back then they would have been called emissaries or something like that. But nowadays they're, I don't know, what would you call them? Just people that go out and do things like that. Anyway, he went out from Beersheba, which is pretty much the southern boundary of Judah, to Mount Ephraim, which is pretty much the northern boundary of Judah. So he went from the bottom to the top and brought them back unto the Lord God of their fathers. So he not only straightened himself out or tried to straighten himself out, he was going to do the whole country, the whole land. And it didn't end there. You know, you can go into a place, and a lot of times you'll see evangelists will go into a place and they'll preach a few messages, and people will get saved, and then they're gone. And they're left up to their own devices, and that's not right. We are to teach. Anyway, so what does Jehoshaphat do in verse 5? And he set judges in the land throughout all the fenced cities of Judah, city by city. So he set up judges and said to the judges, and he doesn't just put judges over them, he instructs the judges, not just the people. And he said to the judges, take heed what you do, for you judge not from man, but for the Lord who is with you in the judgment. In other words, you're doing the Lord's work. Make sure you do it right. Verse 7, wherefore let the fear of the Lord be upon you, take heed and do it, for there is no iniquity with the Lord our God, nor respect of persons, nor taking of gifts. In other words, you don't do something because this guy is a fine looking feller and this guy is bedraggled and everything like that. No, you don't do that. You give a just judgment. And you don't take gifts. Now, I probably just about every person in the House of Representatives and the Senate receives gifts. So we might not call them that, but people give them money so they can run and maintain their offices and things like that. And I think it's buying favor, really. Now, there's supposed to be limits on what they can give, but there's ways around that too. So anyway, in our day and time, there is taking of gifts. Now, these men are not necessarily judges, but they're the lawmakers, which in that time, that's what judges did. They were to apply the law. So, verse 8, moreover, in Jerusalem does Jehoshaphat set of the Levites and of the priests and of the chief of the fathers of Israel for the judgment of the Lord and for controversies when they returned to Jerusalem. So, he set up judges over the civil things, and he set up the Levites, or maybe another type of judge, whatever you'd want to call them, over the things of God. So they weren't combined. Verse 9, and he charged them, saying, thus shall you do in the fear of the Lord faithfully and with a perfect heart. And what cause soever shall come to you, or of your brethren that dwell in their cities, between blood and blood, between law and commandment, statutes and judgments, you shall even warn them that they trespass not against the Lord, and so wrath come upon you and upon your brethren. This do, and ye shall not trespass. In other words, warn them. Warn the people that they might not sin against the Lord, and they won't want to trespass against the Lord. And he said, if you do this, then you won't trespass. You got to be follow the instructions here. And verse 11, and behold, Amariah, the chief priest, is over you in all manners of the Lord. And Zebediah, the son of Ishmael, the ruler of the house of Judah, for all the king's matters. So he's got this over the spiritual matters, this fellow, and this fellow over the civil matters. That way everything's taken care of. Also, the Levites shall be officers before you. Deal courageously, and the Lord shall be with you, with the good. In other words, they were to do what's right, always. Not just to please somebody or anything like that. Always do what the Lord would have you to do. And that's what we need to do too. And I actually made it to the end of my lesson this morning. That's hard to believe. Anyway, stay tuned. Pastor's message is going to be soon.